Imagine you have everything in your hands right now, and you're happy. There's no spot on earth you'd love more. But for whatever reason, everything can suddenly be taken away. When pre-Second World War tensions rose, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union divided Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. When the whole world felt war coming to an end, it did not stop in Eastern Europe.
When the communists planned to take over the Baltic states,
Lithuania was getting ready for one of the biggest resistance movements in the world's modern history. When in 1944, the Red Army pushed Nazis away from Lithuania and occupied it using force and false elections again, thousands of Lithuanians decided to resist and joined an underground spontaneous movement against the Soviet state. These men were called the Freedom Fighters. Their goal was to restore the independent, democratic Lithuania. The vast majority of Lithuanians supported this movement of 30,000 men. There was also hope for a more active discussion about it in the West. But meanwhile, people were forced to make a choice: run and hide, conform to one of the enemies, or fight for your own state. The suffered inhumanity from previous occupations was a strong reason to resist. The opponent was brutal. There were no neighboring states to hide in safely. Nothing but forests were left as a safe place to group in and start resisting from underground bunkers. The conditions to live in for such a long time were incredibly rough. Despite all the hardship, after 5 years of difficult fighting, the movement managed to achieve control over the majority of Lithuania. And later, an organized movement was formed that took up not only military, but also political will with the Declaration of 1949. But some people were not strong enough to resist the mental and physical atrocities of the regime. The deportations, loots, and murders of partisan families and civilians. This was an excruciating terror, impossible to fight alone. So, some partisans tried to break through the Iron Curtain to the West as diplomats, and some printed underground press to counter the brainwashing propaganda. As the Soviets took possession of local farms, food supplies were drastically cut down, making it impossible to keep fighting. Because of all these barbarous techniques, more betrayals within the resistance itself took place. This treacherous war crippled it until some of the very last commanders were captured. And the movement was painfully defeated. But the freedom fighter spirit has survived up to this day. The dissident press, the famous protests, the Baltic Way, the resistance of 1991 during the 50-year occupation are all proofs of the freedom fighters' legacy that survived in the memory of this nation. It all shows that if something happens, we will fight and remain resilient, just as you would, for your own family, culture, and nation.